Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday night microdosing group for the month of April. We are already at the end of April. I can't believe how fast time is going. This spring is flying by. I wanted to open up our discussion tonight and talking about something that seems to be rather prevalent within society, but we often don't think about in our daily lives, and that's the idea of being offended or snubbed or hurt or slighted. It's so easy for us to take offense when we believe that somebody has an intention toward us in some way. And that comes out in the things that they say, or the facial expressions that they make, or the sighs, or the humps, or the ignoring, or whatever it might be that is an action on someone else's end that creates a certain feeling in us about how we experience that moment. And so when we describe it as being hurt or offended, wanted to just kind of dig into what that actually means. Because what that means is that we are allowing the way someone else is acting or speaking to reflect to us in a way that we feel less than. We question what our value is. We question the level of intelligence that someone else thinks that we have. We question the idea of the self. And so another word that we can use for that is ego. It hurts our ego, right? When we talk about being egocentric, that is being centered on how we feel, what we think, what we want, how we respond to things. Are we getting something that makes us feel comfortable or uncomfortable? And so when we start microdosing, there's a couple key areas of the brain that are impacted. And the very first one is the amygdala. And that's in the back of the brain where that fight or flight, fear, and a lot of emotional responses arise from. And that's our first signal that something is awry. Because the amygdala and the hippocampus are closely connected. And the hippocampus is where memory is stored. So we feel something and we determine that it means something. And that happens in less than a second. It's immediate. As soon as somebody says something that we say hurts our feelings, or as soon as they give that look that we start to learn first from parents or guardians in our home of origin, and then later from other people that we care about, friends, significant others, you get that look that says, you have upset me in some way. I'm not happy with what you're saying. I'm not happy with how you're responding. And we automatically put a message into that. And that message goes straight to ourself. And it goes through that default mode network that we've talked about some in previous groups that holds all of those initial belief systems, all of those ingrained ideas, thoughts, definitions of how people reflect to us and how we view the world. So as we're working our way through those other ideas, we are making the determination that this is something that we are going to take offense to. So let's reframe that a little bit. Somebody does something, we say, you hurt my feelings. But if we reframe that to, I am taking offense to what you said or did, we realize that we actually have control over it. We don't always like to think we have control over it because if we don't have control, then we're therefore not responsible for how we respond. You know, oh, I'm going to flip someone off in traffic, or I'm going to give a massive emotional response to my significant other, or I'm going to say something really snarky back because if you hurt me and I now have permission to hurt you. But if we are taking offense, that is an action that we are choosing rather than being hurt, which is something that feels a little more secondary or something that's put on us. So if we reduce blood flow to the amygdala and we're not coming from such a high emotional response place, we quiet down that inner chatter that says everything is about me and everything means something about me and determines my value. Then we have a chance to actually respond differently. We don't have to take offense. We don't have to hurt them back because they hurt us. We don't have to respond in a snarky way that afterwards we're like, man, why can't I just control my emotions and not say that or not do that or not respond that way because that's my ingrained default way of responding. Those decisions in those moments are what gives us the opportunity to move towards a different outcome in our daily lives because we think differently about what's happening. We think differently about why it hurt our feelings. Why am I choosing to take offense to this? So, as we open this discussion up a little bit around this, what's coming to mind for you guys with the idea of instead of being hurt, being slighted, being snubbed, or being offended, we are instead choosing to take offense or choosing not to take offense, and therefore having more of an ownership in how we respond and in the outcome.
This is such a fantastic topic. I have read the Toltec Four Agreements. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I read that last year and recognized in myself that I take everything personally, and I'm a very heart-led person. So I just, I didn't realize that. I think a shift for me was that idea that everybody else was so focused on me, and kind of that ego. Yeah, like you were explaining, just the ego self of wanting all the satisfaction of those things or that, attention, but in the same way, a lot of times I would just take everything so personally. So I don't know if it's a combination of microdosing or some other recovery work I do, or like perimenopause is helping me stop caring so much, I think. And just shifting some of those thoughts of everything is not about me.
Mhm.
And being able to take that with the good stuff and the bad stuff. You know what I mean? What it helps me do is come to a more neutral place to where I'm not overly ecstatic when I get good attention or overly devastated when I get negative attention. It's like I can swing, the pendulum for me is that way. So, but I think the distinction of making a choice is key. Is so key to that. And I love that you bring that up because um yeah, just the slowing down that I think I allow myself to have now that I didn't used to before. I thought I had to be quick in order to be smart and on it and have all my stuff together. But I'm learning more and more that the slowing down and that taking back of my choice to be oh, is what that person said true? Maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but I still have a choice whether or not I agree with it, whether or not I choose to take it personally and whether or not I agree with it. And so I definitely don't get it right every time, but I'm very happy to see myself doing that more and more and recognizing it more and more when it comes in, recognizing how I feel when I'm starting to do that. Because I think for a long time I didn't even recognize when that's what I was doing. Like it felt so real. So I think putting that back to their responsibility and that's on them and it's my choice whether or not I agree and I'm allowed to be myself here in my bubble. So that's helpful.
Yes. Yeah, I can choose to let you in my bubble or not.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
choice in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. One thing that stood out to me was the reminder that if we're going to make a choice in our responses, it's not just about setting aside the things that maybe hurt our feelings and saying, oh, I just don't let anything unkind bother me. We also cannot take full ownership of when somebody provides a compliment or says, you're so awesome and amazing. Because if we're going to take on that, you're so awesome and amazing, then how do we and then determine internally, wow, I'm awesome and amazing because this person said I am. Where's the differentiation between also you're not very smart and you're not very amazing, on the other side, when somebody else wants to throw that opinion out there. So being able to recognize both of those, and it's not that you can't say, oh, thank you, that was really nice, or okay, that was kind of rude, but whatever, or you just let it go. But it is noting in the moment that somebody saying I'm awesome and amazing doesn't really make me any more valuable. And someone saying I have no value doesn't make me any less valuable. So allowing yourself to exist not for the purpose of seeking the response from the people around us, but instead standing in the space of autonomy and recognizing, yeah, I'm going to have things that we agree on, I'm going to have things we don't agree on, and that's okay. It doesn't make us altruistic and all knowing and all of that, but it does say, I don't need someone else to validate me in order to feel that there is purpose in my existence on this planet, or invalidate me to confirm that I have no purpose in my existence on this planet, because we do tend to seek both. We just seek it in different ways. So thank you very much for that reminder and for sharing how that's been helpful to you.
Can I share really quick? I have a cup. What are these called? See,
A coaster?
perimenopause. Thank you. Coaster. That says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That's a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt. So, good topic.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything that has come to mind for them that they would like to share on the specific topic or around the idea?
I think I'd like to share. And to Tori's point, I mean, she made a lot of good points and she really hit home on a lot of things for me. Um, this last year or so, I've really been on a journey, also perimenopause, but that's beside the point. Um, Trying to figure out why I react the way I do when I do. For me, I was really able to pinpoint that my anger or frustration or my snippies come from oftentimes me just not sharing what is actually going on. Like I just let things build up and build up and build up. And if I snip at somebody, my husband, bless him, or anybody else, that's me. That's not about what they're doing or what they're not doing, because I can always communicate better than what I choose to at that moment. So I started realizing and making different actions, right? If I was starting to feel overwhelmed, instead of letting it build up, I would talk about it before I got to that build up space, before I snipped to somebody, or might not have acted or spoken the way that my heart was intending to. So now, after I really pinpointed that and I started working on myself more with those actions, I was able to take a lot less offense when somebody else snips and somebody else is frustrated. I'm now almost a full-time caregiver for my father-in-law. My husband and I are helping him, transition into assisted care. And today was a tough day. Today was a snippy day. And, I was really able to separate myself today. Like, okay, he's having a bad day. I'm here today. That's why I'm getting it. And I'm able to use that in other parts of my life too. My husband, if he comes home and he's just a bear and growling, I'm like, what was going on today? Tell me about your day. And that normally defuses it without like lecturing him and being like, hey, this is how I feel and this is how I worked on it. Like, no, he doesn't need to hear that, but I'm able to recognize and diffuse, sometimes some snippiness or frustration before it even gets to that point, because I'm able to implement how I feel that, listen, it's not about somebody else when I get short or when I don't act the way that I'm proud of. Um, so that's really helped me out.
Mhm. Absolutely. No, you're right. We have to look at ourselves first, and that's how are we responding to others, because that's going to impact their day. We're all on this learning curve together of recognizing that we give a little bit too much attention to our own idea of our self-importance sometimes. And that's probably coming from a place of what we have learned, again, throughout our lifespan. As children are the most egocentric that are out there, but we don't see them responding to each other in the way that adults do. When you see an egocentric adult or someone that we would define as egocentric or narcissistic as an adult, it's very off-putting, because you feel like, hey, you've had enough life experience, you should know better. But when a child does it, it's, oh, the child is here for survival. They are starting to understand that they are part of something that is larger than just themselves. But as adults, we learn how we interact with the people around us because life is about stimulus and response. And if we are someone's stimulus, then we are going to get their response, just like other people are our stimulus, and we get to choose how we respond. So, Samantha, thank you so much for that reminder that it starts with us first and recognizing how we are responding to others and what part we might be playing in their taking of offense and being able to dial back that first. And that makes it a lot easier to be able to recognize that in ourselves when others do it to us. Anybody else have? Yeah.
You know, I, I don't have anything to add to the subject. This is my first time here, and I think I'm in the wrong group because we really just had some questions about microdosing. I just harvested and dried all the mushrooms, and we don't know what we're doing. So
You are absolutely is still in the right group, Holly. It's okay.
Oh,
So,
Okay.
and
No.
he had cataract surgery today.
Yeah.
He's not a pirate.
Yeah.
You know what? We weren't going to judge regardless. If you want to be a pirate, you can.
Arr,
But,
Vast
yes.
derby dogs,
yes, I would recommend a skull and crossbone on that if you want to go full pirate.
I hope it's not around long. Yeah.
Oh goodness. No, glad you could make it tonight. No, this is a group where we do talk about microdosing. We can talk about some of those questions about your thought box and stuff as well. The goal in basically the one Tuesday night group a month that I moderate is to kind of take things a little bit deeper. And so when we are microdosing, we come back to why are we using mushrooms? And so this is a great chance to really bring that up because that's the goal. Okay, mushrooms have been decriminalized within Colorado and some other areas across the country. The federal administration now is making a push towards accelerating that FDA approval of rescheduling it from a Schedule 1 substance down to something that's actually more manageable and more research can be done and can be more accessible for people across the US. But why do we care? Why do we care? You can have a thought box and grow mushrooms. Why do we care that we can talk about microdosing and how to use it and the benefits of it? Because psilocybin impacts the areas of the brain directly connected to how we think. And when we can change how we think, we change the outcome of our lives. We move away from those ways of thinking that have held us back and not helped us to move forward into the things that we want. We move away from those offenses that we take on so personally and that again cause us to respond in an equally offensive way to the people around us and separate some of those relationships. We get rid of brain fog and perimenopause and menopause symptoms, for individuals that are struggling with those, or even just we'll call it aging, the human aging process, male or female. We all get to have aspects of it. So that's really the goal in kind of this initial conversation. It's just a reminder of why it's important. Why is it that individuals are doing large doses and trying to find that healing? And then why is it that we're able to really look at these small doses of psilocybin and how it impacts the brain and find healing? Because the human condition is hard and it's flawed and it's painful. And if we're just left to trip and fall into our default way of living and our default way of thinking, then that is equally painful and nothing really changes. So that's the goal of some of this conversation. You're absolutely in the right group. We're just torturing you with all the challenging part first, and then we talk about
Just sort of more advanced than we are by far in thinking about this. Like the kinds of questions on my mind is sort of how will you sense that the mushrooms are a part of what your journey is in your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. A big piece of that, because microdosing is not about what we feel. We're so used to focusing on how we feel. Oh, I feel happy. I feel sad. I feel joy. I feel depression. We feel all these things that we put words to. Microdosing psilocybin is about what we notice. It's a change of perspective. It's noticing, just like Tori was talking about, that those things that used to get us all wound up, they're just not quite so spiraling anymore. We're able to more readily set them aside. When someone cuts us off on the interstate, it doesn't feel like a personal slight. It's, hey, we're all going the same way, and apparently it wasn't going fast enough for you. Or, the individuals that can be really irritating in life because they just kind of grate on your nerves because they're just so dang annoying. You just kind of set it aside. Doesn't really matter. They're a person. They have their own things that are going on. It's not as bothersome to us. Why? Because the world isn't about us. The world is about the world. The communities are about the communities. And even within our individual cultures, the system is about the system. It's not about individuals. So, how do we as individuals showing up with our own thoughts, our own ideas, our own dreams, our own feelings, all of these things that are very individualized in our life experience, how do we experience those without feeling like we are being controlled by the system? The system within the United States is, here, be born, go to school for 12 years of your life, graduate from that school, get into a 4-year school, go to school for 4 more years, come out with some sort of piece of paper that says you're qualified to do something, go pick a job, maybe do some more school after that, depending on if you just really haven't decided or whatever you picked needs lots more education. And then somehow you come out at the end of that with this amazing career and you've got a spouse of your choosing and maybe some children and 3 dogs and 2 cats and a white picket fence, and now you've made it. And then when we look around and that is not our life at all, because there's a massive amount of the American population that lives below the poverty line and works multiple jobs just to make ends meet and doesn't even have a fence because there is no yard. Or for people that like living in condos, that's an option too, but maybe get a really teeny tiny condo. Whatever you're getting, it's not what you thought you were going to get. What happened? I did all the things that I was told to do, and now I'm realizing the system perpetuates the system. So unless we choose to completely separate ourselves from that, which honestly just means you're moving to a different system, unless you find a little tiny island somewhere that nobody inhabits yet, you're still going to be part of a system somewhere and a part of a community. So the goal is not to separate from that. The goal is to recognize it for what it is and to decide how you want to exist within that and see your experience on this planet as having that purpose that often we talk about, having the goals that you want, getting what you want out of your experience on the planet, but not being driven by what the system says this is what it should look like. Because then we live in the shoulda, coulda, woulda, and then the what if fears about the future. The goal is to live in the present. Yes, you plan for the future, save money, put things away, have your food storage if you want to. Zombie apocalypse could happen. We never know. So, we live within the reality of where we are, but it's not in a state of fear. Because if we live in a state of fear of not being prepared or these things that happened from the past defining how we show up now, then we're not being intentional about moving towards the experience that we want. That's what psilocybin really allows us to do. So that's big picture. So if we dial all that down, how do we get to that? We get to that by questioning definitions, by really thinking about the words that we use and the way that we express ourselves and the interactions that we have with others and what we choose to get wound around the axle on, because most of them are things we can't control. And sitting all wound up about things we can't control doesn't serve us at all. It creates more stress. That's going to, depress your prefrontal cortex, break down your executive functioning, dispel the memory. So instead of breaking down the body because we're holding on to all this stress from the system, separate from that, think differently about what it means and why we're here and what we want, and then we can move forward in that. So that's how microdosing is working. But Tori also shared some of the things that she had experienced. Tori, do you mind? I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you're typically really great about sharing, but just some of the things that you've noticed real specific in your journey with microdosing.
Yeah, as far as the thinking, not the microdose box, like the ways of thinking, yeah. So I started about I guess it's been about a year and a half. I started about 2 years ago, but it was about a year and a half ago that I met Charity and started really kind of using more intention with microdosing. I had done some journeying and stuff like that with it before, but also came from a recovery background, so doing step works and stuff like that. And um, so what I found myself being able to do was really integrate all of the work that I'd done. Like I felt like the spreadsheets, all of the call it shadow work, call it whatever you want, like it was all done. Like I had it in my head, but it was like actually embodying it and like integrating it in a way was like there was just something blocking it. And I do have complex PTSD and some other stuff. I had been on medications on and off for like 10 years of like different things to treat anxiety and depression. I have a chronic disease. So, um, managing that. So it all was just so overwhelming. And this has been the first. So now I'm off of all of those medications, and it was a process. So I'm not saying like it happens overnight. But this, I had been cutting off, and then there was one that an SSRI that I just couldn't get off of. And so that's why I had been looking into the psilocybin and microdosing. So not only was I able to get off of that, I feel like my brain has just continued to heal in ways that I can't explain. Through like sometimes it's hard to translate, but that's why I like coming to these groups because when I'm thinking about what I'm thinking, like I do recognize the ways in which I'm thinking differently and that my perspective is shifting and that I'm actually integrating and embodying the things that I believe and value versus like the fear that I had before of like, oh, what if I say this, if it's going to be wrong or am I going to be judged? And, being able to turn those things around and instead of having the projection be, oh, they're judging me, being able to look at it and be like, where am I judging myself? Where do I need to give myself more love? Where do I need to give myself more acceptance or grace? So yeah, it's just been a really good like introspective tool. Um, and it's healing my brain. And I've known for a while, addiction is a disease of the brain. We know that. So, I
Can
think
I
people
ask
can
you?
be addicted to anything, other people, electronics, food, you name it. So it's about like not necessarily saying that we can't have those things, but learning how to moderate them. And it's a good teacher. Golden teacher. It's a great teacher.
Can I ask you a couple of like questions that'll seem really simple? Because
Absolutely.
you can tell you're at a very sophisticated level in thinking about this, and we're such novices here. The sort of questions at the beginning are, you don't even really know what dose to use. Did you start out by experimenting in different
Yeah.
ways? How did you know when you felt like you were hitting a regime that felt like it was working positively for you?
If I end up taking too much, I just get really sleepy. Like I actually got to see Charity over the weekend and I was asking her for my microdose because I'm waiting in between. I might be moving and stuff like that. So I'm waiting to do my next box. So I got some honey to hold me over. And I was like, should I go for like the more psilocybin-y one? Like maybe, and she's like, well, what's your dose? I'm like, well, it's only like 50 milligrams. It's not that much, like 50 to 80, 3 or 4 times a week. And what I noticed when I was doing more than that, it wasn't in judgment. It was just like, oh, I get really tired and like I need a nap. If I take, after it kind of wears off, then it's like, then I really need a nap. So like cutting back on it, but really in the beginning, especially coming from like an AA background, I needed permission to experiment and like
Right.
to, maybe make some mistakes, but again, I think it goes back to that non-judgment of myself where I wasn't following anyone else's rules necessarily, but I had permission to follow my own instinct and my own guidance and my own internal, yeah, higher self, kind of like what Charity talks about the ego versus like the higher self guiding. And so it takes some time to learn to trust that though, but I promise it comes. So like I had the permission from Charity and then I had to kind of like, yeah, test and find out, you know, um, and maybe take too much sometimes and then, scale it back. And now I'm at a pretty good spot. And then, also there's no one and done. Like it's never a fixed system, right? Like we're always in seasons and flow. And that's kind of the point of like what Charity was talking about too. We're in these like really rigid systems, but actually the more natural thing is to go with a flow in a season. So I allow myself that too. Like there might be seasons where I don't do it as much. So yeah, give yourself space for that. There's really no wrong way.
Mhm.
I mean, I can't imagine unless you want to like take a hero's dose every day.
No,
It might be too much, but yeah.
so maybe like
Up
keep
to
a
you
little,
also.
keep a
Like that
little,
might be your jam. No judgment.
yeah.
Does that answer?
Oh, I mean, what I'm thinking is I hear this as maybe keeping a journal and being kind of, experimental about it and,
Mhm.
you know,
Well,
When you
Charity has
guys,
a book,
Mhm.
yeah, that you can journal, and it's the same thing. It's like little prompts to like what you're thinking and stuff like that. Super helpful. I use all those tools.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you start with one of the microdosing subscription packages, you get access to a 6-week video series of called Microdosing with Purpose. It aligns with the book. You can also get a copy of the book through our website, and it's also called Microdosing with Purpose and Getting Started with Microdosing. And you can get it on Amazon as well. So you can check either of those places. Just grow your own thoughts, microdosing with purpose. But it's a 6-week guide that really helps you track your dose and pay attention to the things that you are noticing. So Samantha has her hand raised, so I'm going to let her jump in real quick and see what her questions are.
No, thank you. And it kind of goes along with him. So I'm newer to microdosing as well. So I've got a lot of the same questions, I feel like. I do have your kit, and I've been trying to play. I've got two questions. I'm sorry. Trying to play around with like the dosage and finding out what's right. And I've noticed that, something that you may have, say the chocolate bar or the honey, if I'm consistent with that, then I have a good idea of, kind of how it hits and how strong. But if I move to something else, even if it's measured out the same, completely different effects. And I'm like, why am I not feeling something, or why am I feeling this so much? But is that just kind of par for the course with trying things out and seeing where your comfort lies?
Yeah, the first answer is yes, because the body metabolizes those other things differently. That's why you'll hear my recommendation be start with the powder, because there's nothing else added to it. At Grow Your Own Thoughts, we do not recommend stacking any other things. There's some pretty popular stacks out in the industry that talk about using lion's mane and niacin and other mushrooms and things with psilocybin. And I always say, don't do that. If you have not already been using those things, do not start using them at the same time you use psilocybin. You don't need anything else to have psilocybin work. It works all by itself, and you don't need an activator when you are microdosing. So when you're microdosing, start with the ground powder, start with that one little 0.05 scoop, take that scoop, go about your day. At the end of the day is when you want to reflect. What did I notice today? What might be a little bit different? Did I respond a little differently? Was my mind a little quieter? Did I have fewer depressive thoughts? It's not always about having more happy thoughts. It's just having fewer depressive thoughts or fewer negative thoughts sometimes. Did my body feel a little bit more relaxed because we hold a lot of tension and stress in our body? Is my communication a little bit different? Am I listening to others and really taking into consideration the things that they say rather than listening with the intent to say something back? And so, just kind of planning a response in my head. Those are the kind of things that you're going to, did my emotions fluctuate a little bit? Maybe you're a little bit more emotional, maybe you're a little less emotional. Again, we're not going to do something based off emotions, but emotions are a physiological response. So we do pay attention to that. But that's really the goal in that first 6 weeks is definitely tracking your dose, whether you use the video series and download the chart in there, or you use the book and you use the chart in there, or you just get a notebook and start writing down the date and the dose you took and what you noticed. Some of the things to reflect on are your clarity, your mood, your sleep. Those are kind of, I think, some of the top things that I have listed in there. But, what am I noticing and how my thinking is? And then as you're deciding, if I didn't notice anything today, then the next day increase that dose a little bit. And if you're increasing by 0.05 at a time, you're going to take those real slow steps. You're not going to go from one scoop of noticing nothing to 2 scoops, and all of a sudden dragons are coming out of the walls and all the colors are brighter and the earth is swallowing you up. It is such a small incremental increase that's really the safest way to increase when it comes to microdosing. It is not subperceptual. That is a word that is often used. If you are not perceiving something, your dose is not high enough. It is subhallucinogenic. So we don't want to hit that hallucinogenic threshold. And like Tori had mentioned, that threshold of it being a little bit high, it's kind of a wide gap between the microdose and then a hallucinogenic experience. But if you take too much, you might find that you are really tired, or you might find that you're a little bit more edgy or a little bit more wired. We are stimulating the serotonin receptors in that prefrontal cortex, some more energy, more focus, but also just kind of enhancing everything. So if you find that that's something that you're doing, you're like, oh, that felt a little off. I'm going to dial that back a little bit. If you cannot drive a car, that is not your microdose. Do not drive the car and back it off. Go back down one scoop and back to that threshold. But Samantha, back to your question about whether you're taking it in the powder or the chocolate or the honey. Yes, you will have different responses to that because the body metabolizes the chocolate differently and it metabolizes the honey differently. So that's where we really recommend starting with the powder. The second layer if you don't have the powder, then the honey is where I recommend starting. The honey metabolizes very gently. It's a much more gentle onset. And it's much more similar to the powder. The thing with the honey is I say it's the least scientific way to microdose because again, we use the full body of the mushroom stirred into the honey. So you've got to give it a good stir every time to get it, all mixed up in there. And then you're taking about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon, kind of depending on that dose and where you're starting. So with the honey, use your butter knife, stir it up, wipe it off on the sides, wipe that butter knife off, and then just dip it a little, quarter of an inch or half inch in, and add that to your tea or coffee or put it on your toast or straight into your mouth, whatever you want to. But then with the chocolate, the dosing as far as the amount of psilocybin in it can be the same, but the chocolate takes about 45 minutes to onset. So it takes a little bit longer and it tends to metabolize all at one time. So it hits a little bit differently. You notice it a little bit more strongly. For some people, the chocolate makes them really tired. For other people, the chocolate wakes them up. So we certainly have clients who say, hey, I love using the chocolate at night. I'll take my little dose at about 6 o'clock. I've got some energy for a while because of that 2-hour and 43-minute half-life. There's that stimulation point, but then it just knocks me out and I go to sleep and I sleep great. Why do we sleep great with that? Because it's quieting down the inner chatter. We don't lay in bed awake because the body's not tired. It's because the brain will not be quiet. So when we quiet down all that inner chatter and that default mode network, then you get great sleep and you don't wake up feeling groggy and there's no what I'm going to call hangover like you would have with alcohol or marijuana or Ambien or those other things that people often use as sleep aids. So yes, there's definitely a distinct difference between using chocolate and honey and ground powder. Definitely recommend the ground powder if you have that to start with. Second choice would be the honey as far as getting a more natural onset.
I will say that I have never slept so well since I started doing this, and I've only just hit the 30 days mark, and I did not even correlate those two. So thank you for spelling that out for me. Last question. I'm sorry to bother and jump in. I've read the different microdosing methods, a couple days on, whatever, a few more days on, a few days off. I've kind of been playing around with those as well and kind of also aligning them with, upcoming events for the week or whatever. If something's going to be more stressful, then I'll plan accordingly. Is there any ideas or guidance about how long you should be microdosing for? Like I've heard some people say just for 30 days and no more. And I've heard others say, no, it's kind of a continuous thing as long as you're, taking your breaks during the week and have a couple of days off. So what is it that you recommend?
Well, you can do it as long as you want, and you can do it every day. The body does not build a tolerance to psilocybin when you're microdosing. So I say, why have a crappy day every other day if you are feeling, really noticing positive benefits on your microdosing days? You do not have to take days off. The body's not going to develop a tolerance to it. I have worked with over 1,000 individuals for, what are we at, over 4 years at this point in time, almost 5 years. And the results are the same. When I look at research, we have laboratory research, and then we have research that's in real life. Microdosing is really about real life research. We know the laboratory research shows us the science of what's happening in the brain with psilocybin, but we're not controlling variables when it comes to microdosing. take your dose, go about your day. And everybody's day is different and everybody's body is different. The way we respond to things are different. So with that consistently though, the dose goes down over time. Using psilocybin is a healing modality. We are enhancing neuroplasticity. We are resetting the default mode network. We're changing the way that we think. So over time, you're going to need less, not more. You do not have to take days off when microdosing. We have clients that have microdosed practically every single day for years at this point. And that's what has been helpful to their brain. But over time, they're no longer using a full gram every day. Maybe now they're down to a half a gram, or they're down to 0.3 of a gram, or they are taking a day off here or there, depending on that dose. So it is not, it is a listen to your body. Just like Tori said, give yourself permission to find out what is helpful to you. If you find that you take a microdose and the next day your brain says, I'm still noticing benefits from that, I don't need to dose today, then don't dose that day. That's completely fine. There's no reason not to take the dose either. But you do not have to follow a set regimen of 3 days on, 4 days off, or every other day, or a month off after a month on. That is all just noise. And that noise is created by the system that we have that says this is how pharmaceuticals work, or this is how large doses work. Just to touch on that real quickly, for individuals that do a large dose of psilocybin, there is a significant disruption to the serotonin system. That's how it works. But when you take, 2 to 7 grams of it, you are so significantly disrupting the serotonin system that you're getting that huge glutamate response that goes along with it. You're having the hallucinogenic experience. The body likes homeostasis. The body is going to say, wow, that was unexpected. We did not see that coming. So next time, let's make sure that we have a little bit of a different tolerance for that, because the body is seeking homeostasis for these large disruptions. Just like when we experience something traumatic, the body chooses a coping mechanism. Sometimes it chooses an outburst, sometimes it chooses to go inward, sometimes it chooses to dissociate. These are coping mechanisms that the body chooses when it comes to survival and achieving that I need to stay alive and I want homeostasis. So with that, those large doses and the research that goes along with that and the recommendation to not do a large dose of psilocybin every day, that all stands. With microdosing, it's completely different. And so when we really look at how the body responds, and we have over 1,000 individuals of working with and years of working with individuals within the same system, those are consistent results. So how long you choose to microdose on a regular basis is 100% up to you. It depends on the benefits that you're getting, and also understanding how it is a helpful tool for times in life that do come up. So I'll just give a little personal example. I've been microdosing for over 4 years now, but I don't dose every day. I can go weeks and even months without microdosing. But I know that when things come up where my brain starts getting kind of wound up about things, because my natural way to deal with stress is to try and control everything, which is why you hear me talk about it so much in group, the recognition that we really don't control 90% of what we think we do. But when my brain gets to that place of feeling like, okay, I got to figure this out, there's something going on, what if, or, something going on within the business or family or whatever it might be, I know that I can go back to that microdose and I can take a dose for a couple of days and my brain's like, yep, you're right. We don't need to get wound up about this. It is helpful. It is not a coping mechanism. And the reason it is not a coping mechanism is because I'm not doing that to cover up the way that I think. My thinking has so significantly changed over the past 4 years that it is actually impossible for me to think the way that I used to think. I look back on it, and it's almost like observing somebody else's thoughts within a movie, because my own internal thinking is so different now. But it helps to be able to quiet the brain down to remember, oh yeah, you don't need to get worked up about this. This is not something that's yours to figure out. Set it aside. Or, your hormones are a little off right now because, yeah, to Tori's point, that perimenopause and hormone thing is real. So let's just quiet that down a little bit. And that's how it's helpful. My dose to this day is that one little tiny white scoop, 0.05 of a gram, 1/32 of a teaspoon of ground mushroom. That's it. After 4 years, I don't need more. Honestly, it's even less than a little full scoop. Because if I do a heaping scoop, then I'm like, well, now I'm just going to take a nap, or, sit back and maybe work on some marketing stuff because all of a sudden my creative side comes out a little bit that's not naturally there quite as much. So you learn to find the dose that's helpful to you and how it's helpful to you. And you give yourself permission to have a little curiosity around it. Take a day off here and there if you want to, just to show yourself you can. And look, nothing crazy happened. And that time will come where I don't need to dose every day. Okay, I'm going to take a few days off and just pay attention to how my thinking has changed. Recognize it. It's kind of like it's fun to have a new car, but it doesn't make sense to back the car out of the garage down the driveway just to kind of take a 90-degree angle to get the mail. That's using a lot of energy of the car to do something that doesn't need to require that much energy. Same with microdosing. As that healing is happening, you're going to find you don't need the same energy being put in to help with the healing when the healing is already happening. We don't keep going to physical therapy after we've had surgery and the joint is healed and we have full range of motion. They're like, hey, you have full range of motion. Great. The equivalent to that in mental health is, hey, you think differently. The way you thought before has been reset. You consider things for your life in a different way. Great. You don't need to keep going to physical therapy for your brain anymore. So there's no cut and dry answer for how long and how much and all of that because it is so individualized. But the results are the same. You can microdose every day. You don't develop a tolerance to it. You can microdose twice a day if you want to, for ever in a row, for all the days in a row. Then maybe what you're cutting back to is once a day. And then maybe you're cutting back down the dose. And then maybe you're starting to have some days that you skip in between. And then, oh, I went for a month and didn't microdose. And I'm not even thinking about the fact I didn't microdose. I don't need to take something that I don't need. So
Okay.
that's kind of a lot of words, but yeah, I'll pause and give you guys a chance to reflect on that.
No,
Well,
that was
okay.
absolutely
No.
perfect and answered everything. Thank you so much.
Good.
Now that's reassuring. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, Polly, did you guys have any other questions? Kind of specific to that with getting started or anything else?
Well, so I grew them and got a nice big jar full, dried them in the dehydrator, and I was thinking to just eat the mushroom, weigh it. I mean, no, we weigh it.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, I got a scale.
Perfect. First weigh, then eat. Yes, let's put it in that order.
Right. So, but I mean, they're not real tasty, but it's no big deal to eat a tiny little mushroom.
Right.
So that's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely okay. The key is exactly what you said, though, in the order you said it, to weigh it and then eat it. The other thing is by using the grinder, you can get a coffee grinder pretty cheap off Amazon, between $10 and $20 to have a designated coffee grinder. That puts it into a nice fine powder. Being new with that, what I will say real quick is if you decide to do that, then after you stop the grinding, do not take the lid off right away, or you will get your full microdose plus more right there. I have done that. I was like, whoops, I definitely inhaled. And so, also don't need to inhale your microdose. Please, for anyone listening to the recording of this, put it in your mouth. That needs to go through the digestive system. A lot of our serotonin receptors are in our gut. So, we get that good mind-gut balance going on there with serotonin. So you want to eat the mushroom. You can also put it into a tea. So if you're not really liking the flavor of it, you can get an infuser and you can put your mushroom into the tea infuser and set that in your hot water. Let it steep for about 10 to 15 minutes. So just put a cover over the top of your mug so that your water is staying in there or it's keeping the warmth in there. Let it steep for about 10 to 15 minutes and then you can pull that infuser out and just drink the tea. So that's an option as well if you have some extra time. That's also an option if you want to try being a little bit curious with your dose and try a little bit more at some point. It's also a great option in taking it at night. So for individuals that find, like Samantha had mentioned, it being really helpful for sleep, again, take that microdose if you're going to add an evening dose. And this is, again, a caveat of if you're adding an evening dose. For a lot of individuals, that one dose in the morning is plenty and it carries all the way through into evening and they don't need any more. If you want to add an evening dose, take it by 6 o'clock. Okay, because remember, we've got a 2 hour and 43-minute half-life. That means after that next 3 hours passes, where you have all the full potency within your system, that's where you're going to have a little more energy. So then by about 9 o'clock or so, that half-life, or that potency has been cut in half, and now you're getting more of just that quieter mind benefit, and it'll be more conducive to sleep. I also recommend taking a smaller dose at night if you're going to do that. So if you're using 2 scoops in the morning, just use 1 scoop for that little evening dose until you pay attention to kind of how your body's responding to it. So, but yeah, as far as being able to use the mushrooms that you harvested, grinding them up is the best way because you get that homogeneous blend of the entirety of the harvest and the stems and caps, and you want to use all of it. But you can grind enough that you need for, a couple weeks or a month or so. And then you can use one of our little white dosing spoons with that same grinding if you want to, if you don't want to use a scale, or you can get a scale that goes to 2 decimal points, which it sounds like you guys got one, and just be consistent in what that dose is.
Okay.
So, but it's fun to grow your own. So,
Yeah.
Tori and I were talking about that a little bit earlier on Thoughtbox group with someone else who was on, and just the connection that you have to the fact that it's just nature. You don't have to do anything to it. It makes sense that as natural beings, nature would have what we need if we know how to use it appropriately. And appropriately can have multiple definitions, but when we're talking about microdosing and getting those day-to-day benefits, that appropriateness is finding the dose that's helpful to you and using that dose on a daily basis in a way that's helpful to you.
Great. All right. Well, we'll see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. As we're kind of wrapping up tonight, does anyone have any other questions right now or comments? Okay, perfect. So at this point in time, I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to stay on after for any additional conversation. For those of you listening in, please feel free to jump on growyourownthoughts.org, check out the calendar, and you'll see all of our listing there of groups. You can click on the link and join any of our online groups at any point in time.